Time's up, Admiral.
Here it comes.
Chevron 1, coded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry havoc, and let's set the tongues of war.
Chevron 2 is coded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
Paul also said you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
Now, provided you can, monkey boy.
Great Scott!
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You shall not pass!
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf.
What about side by side with a friend?
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
Hail and howdy, everybody. Welcome to Saturday Night Drive-In, where we talk movies. I love movies, and as I just told Jed, as I barely got here, I hate going to the movies. I love it, but the movie-going experience is ass now. It really is. But I'll complain about that tomorrow on Roundtable, where I have the room to do that. But we're here to talk movies, and Jed, you love movies.
Yes, I love movies. It's a great medium for storytelling, and I think we have an incredible story to talk about tonight. Neither of us had seen this movie before talking about it tonight, and I was pleasantly surprised. Even though I expected it to be good, I was surprised with how good I found this film, and I'm excited to talk about it. I know you have controversial thoughts, or at least some more nuance than I have bringing to the table. I'm going to do a little bit of hero worship here, but you're going to have a lot more pragmatic view of this film than me, I think.
I mean, when you said this before me from last week, so you thought it was kind of a problem. My problem is so much with Desmond's overall actions. There's one moment, and we'll get to it, where I thought where his then fiance hit it on the nose, and where I thought that way, even though it's his strength, it was still a failing. But we'll get to that. So hell and howdy, everybody in the chat. We're happy to have you with us here today. We hope you're ready for very intelligent discussion, because that's what we do here. At least I hope it is. Hit those like buttons, sit down, grab your drink, and enjoy our discussion. Okay, Jed, this was your pick this week. What do we got?
So this is the story of Hacksaw Ridge, the true story of Desmond Dawes, a conscientious objector who volunteered for World War II, ended up fighting in Japan, trying to take Okinawa, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And, just trying to be the peaceful man that he believed he needed to be, the man of nonviolence and pacifism, but still willing to put himself in the line of fire. And in the centerpiece of the film, he does something extraordinary. He single-handedly stays on a battlefield, finding wounded, staying alive, hiding from the Japanese soldiers, and lowering dozens and dozens of wounded to the bottom of the ridge where they could be helped by the Allied forces. At the end of the film, they said 75 people were saved by him while he stayed up there alone for 24 hours or something like that.
They had taken, on that particular day, they had taken out the bunkers at Hacksaw Ridge. And then they had positioned overnight. but then the Japanese came up through tunnels and overran them. And then they were all forced to retreat. It was another massacre because that's what happened. They didn't know about the tunnels, so they kept coming up because that's where the real base up there was, underground. So they just kept coming up, and there was mass retreat, and dozens of young American soldiers butchered, maimed. And at one point, as we'll get to it, because that's the meat of the movie right there. That is the meat, because this is a true story. It's really happened. And it was very interesting in the credits where they had the interviews.
That was
great.
With
the survivors. With the
that
veterans.
really grounds it, I believe. Shows that they were trying to be historically accurate. I don't know the true history. I haven't read the book that's involved in this. I don't know the story at all. So any historical inaccuracies,
probably a little embellishment here and there. But
there probably is, but I do like, at least in one of the interviews they showed with Desmond at the very end,
they retold the eyes and
something that they physically showed in the film. So I do believe there was a lot of care and thought put into the accuracy of portraying his character and this horrible ordeal that he went through. And I know from for both of us, neither of us are Christians, and I was wondering what you thought about the Christian aspect of it. To me, it didn't feel preachy. It was just integrated into the film, and it would be a very different and poor movie if it didn't have the faith aspect to it. Well, I thought it was done incredibly well.
Yeah, because his faith is one of the central points of the movie. You can't have this real world, real life historical man, this hero. He's a hero. Hands down a hero. You cannot have it, his faith, his particular worship of Christianity. You cannot have it in the movie and not make the movie. It has to be there. You take that out, and it loses something, because if you take it out, you could do the same type of thing in any sort of setting, even a fantasy or science fiction setting, but then it's just a heroic thing. But based in a real life where this man's faith was so grounded, so a part of what made him, based upon, as the lore goes of his backstory, his choices in life, between nearly killing his brother in a fight and then interrupting what it looked like his father's combination murder-suicide moment there. It's what it looked like. It's what it looked like to me. And this is a Mel Gibson directed movie. Mel Gibson is an excellent director.
After seeing this, I would 100% believe the argument that he's a better director than actor. The direction is phenomenal in this film.
He knows when to use slow motion. Unlike Zack Snyder,
who doesn't overdo it.
He knows when to use particular awkward close-ups. He knows he knows the proper amount of gore, as opposed to Steven Spielberg, who doesn't. Spielberg goes over the top with gore. Mel Gibson, and there's a point that he showed this, I believe. We'll get to that later on, why he had to show this.
Are you talking about Saving Private Ryan?
Yes.
I don't know if we'll ever talk about that movie, but I do want to say briefly, I hate that movie.
Yes, I
hate that movie so much.
Too.
The D-Day sequence is phenomenal. I really like the D-Day sequence, but the plot, I can't stand the idea of saving this boy.
Fuck that movie. That is not a good World War II movie. It isn't. It is not. I'll say that. Fight me, anybody that wants to fight me on that. Man, granted, I saw it once on TV. I didn't choose to watch it. It was just on, and wasn't into it. But I saw it, and it was just no. That is well beyond the point where Spielberg had a touch anymore to making good movies. Well beyond, in my opinion. You and I have had that discussion, and we both agree. Comes a point where Spielberg just
it's pretty much the turn of the century. I would consider the late 90s, early 2000s his transitional period. But yeah, at the turn of the century, he was pretty much down.
He didn't care anymore. Wasn't hungry. Didn't care. But that's a discussion for another time. We're going to talk Mel Gibson, who was spot on in every scene in this. Spot on. Every camera angle, every shot, every this and that, lighting, scenery.
Is a beautiful film.
Yeah, it's production value top notch. So Mel Gibson, and that's all we really need to say about it. We'll get that out of the way. Mel Gibson, great job. And he got the most out of. He knew how to get everything out of each actor he had. And this was a surprising cast.
It's pretty star-studded, and a lot of people do different roles than they normally do.
I mean, Hugo Weaving did a good job, but he was awkward to me in the role. Great, but awkward.
I think that was intentional, though.
Yeah. But so my favorite thing in the movie, Vince Vaughn.
That surprises me a lot how much I love Vince Vaughn as well, because I'm not usually a big fan of his. His style of comedy doesn't work for me. I respect him absolutely, but there's not many Vince Vaughn roles that I look at and say that was a great performance. This one is undefeated best Vince Vaughn performance in my opinion.
He is my favorite thing
job.
in this movie. Vince Vaughn is my favorite thing in this movie. Just his
You
performance.
needed a comedian to do some of those line deliveries.
And then the thing, Vince Vaughn can also do serious when he needs to. He can turn it on and go serious when he did in a couple of those moments. So it was great though. So Vince Vaughn as the sergeant, fantastic. You had Hugo Weaving, and of course Andrew Garfield. Great performance. I wasn't sure as the movie started, but then he owned it completely.
He really did. And this is sometimes a controversial statement, but I believe Andrew Garfield is the best Spider-Man actor. He shows the most range. Tobey Maguire probably does a better job in Spider-Man, but I've never really seen a whole lot of range from Tobey Maguire. Andrew Garfield, between Spider-Man, between Hacksaw Ridge, Tick, Tick, Boom, he's really shown that he has the capability to be one of the greatest actors we have in the current era. And this film just really epitomizes it for me, because this is a difficult performance. You've got to show nuance in so many ways. The tortured individual who's still a pacifist. Balancing pacifism against a perception of cowardice is not an easy thing. A lot of people just lean into the cowardice angle, and they'd be mocked on the back half.
His pacifism isn't based on. It isn't based on a hatred of conflict. It's purely based on his faith and his personal interactions with nearly committed violence. Because the line where Smitty is talking to him when they're in the foxhole and they're talking, and they come to their understanding with each other, and he talks about where he interrupts his father, who of course at the time cannot be classified, suffered massive PTSD from World War I. And who wouldn't? World War I was far more bloodier than World War II, just because of the trench warfare of what that was. It horrible, horrible thing. And to survive it and lose all his friends who went with him to France, it broke something in him. And back then, nobody knew how to deal with PTSD. It wasn't even acknowledged. It was, oh, you got shell shock, walk it off. You know, that's what it was back then. So he suffered a massive PTSD, went to the bottle, and became an abusive husband and father. And it, from the way I look at it, so here's what we're going to do forward. Here's how I want to do this. Let's talk about the first half of the movie, encapsulate it, and we'll go to the second half, so that way we don't mix the story up, because I think it's really important that we understand first, because I felt most uncomfortable in the first half of the movie. That was where I was most uncomfortable, and not for the reasons you may think. So I think the only thing I would say is that the first half does suffer from a little bit of pacing problems. You know, I think while everything is necessary, I feel as though at some points it just, can we get to a certain point? You know, I know it's all important, meeting his wife, getting a look at his family, understanding his father and mother's relationships, and then getting to basic training. But I can't put my finger on it exactly. I just feel like maybe 5 or 10 minutes less, something like that. It's just like a smidge off. And just to get to what I'm waiting for, I want to see what happens in the war, because of course we need to get there first. I mean, Jed, out of the first half of the movie, what to you jumped out the most as the most meaningful part in terms of his development, and as we learn all this stuff?
I feel like the first half is more about his environment than it is about himself, because I think Hugo Weaving is the star of the first act. It's all about showing his character, and I love how they portray his character in this film. It's incredibly nuanced. Like you said, he has PTSD, but he's still not a good guy, at least as he becomes after World War I. And a lot of modern-day directors would just fall into the pattern of, yeah, he's just an abusive asshole. Don't care about him. Don't care about saying goodbye to him or anything like that. Leave him in the past where he belongs to die sad and alone. This film was very much like, yes, he's a damaged individual who's hurting other people, but he's still trying to do the right thing for his family. He still cares about his son. One of my favorite scenes is when they're at the dinner table, when Doss's brother comes in uniform.
I knew you were going to go there.
And Hugo Weaving just talks about how his friend looked so great in the uniform before he was shot in the back and his gut splayed out, and the front of his uniform was just demolish. Just scene like that, and seeing how desperate he was to save Desmond later on in the first, second act from the court martial, demanding to come into the courtroom, still being very polite and everything, but saying, "You need to read this letter, sir." And that letter probably saved Andrew Garfield's character's life. He was going to go to prison for the rest of his life, or at least a long time, because he was standing up for his beliefs. And a modern director, just most of them wouldn't be willing to show that type of nuance. Yes, the film condemns him for what he's become, especially with the flashback as Desmond stopping his father from shooting his mother. That is absolutely condemned in the film, but it doesn't condemn the man. And I love that nuance. And I think his character is one of the most important ones besides Desmond, because when you take out the faith aspect of it, which is of course fundamental to the pacifism of Desmond's character, there's also the degree, in my opinion, of seeing what he'll become. If he chooses to be violent, if he chooses to use a gun, he's afraid, I believe, that he's going to turn out just like his father, to be an abusive, horrible man who's prone to violence. And you see in that scene, he's very nearly there. Desmond is on the cusp of shooting his father in the face. And in that moment, he realized, I am capable of great violence. I am capable of taking a man's life. And it terrified him. So there's so much to his pacifism that isn't just the religious aspect, which is of course important, but without showing Hugo Weaving's character to that degree, you wouldn't have got that in the same depth. You would have just, written it off as the religious angle, but because of it, there's so much depth and complexity that no matter what your view of the war is, or war in general, anything like that, I believe most people can watch this film and say, yes, it makes sense why he is a pacifist because of the complexity presented. If this were any other actor besides Hugo Weaving, I would say this would be the best performance of career. I thought it was phenomenal. But you still have things like V for Vendetta.
Hugo Weaving has quite the resume.
Right. So it still stands out amongst his resume, I believe, but it is just a top-notch performance. Besides Andrew, I think it's the best one in the film. And it's fundamental to understanding why Desmond's a pacifist.
You're absolutely right. And I'm going to take the scene from the second half of the movie and put it in the first one. It's a flashback and it takes place in the past. So I'm going to talk about the one you just mentioned where he interrupts what I said looked like a murder-suicide. Looked like he was ready to kill his wife and then kill himself, because when Desmond gets in between, he's saying, do it. Just do it. Just do it. And
he wants to die.
You make the perfect point when you said this is the other half of what makes Desmond Desmond. First, his faith. With that, but this is the part where it's the second half. As I mentioned earlier, the opening scenes where he nearly kills his brother in a fit of rage when they're just, at first you think he's just horsing around, but then what possesses him to grab a stone or a brick and bash his brother in the head? That boggled me when I saw it. And then, of course, that shocked him when he realized what he had done. And he's staring there looking at the religious poster or portrait, whatever it was on the wall there. And he's trying to come to grips with it, but he's a child and can't quite do it. And that's, I think, when he first got the glimpse of it. Then he goes on in life, and then this moment happens where he gets between his father and mother. And the line he says to Smitty, and that's why I'm going to jump ahead just because it's important to this conversation here. When he says, I killed him in my heart. I had done it. I had done it because I hated him so much. And he says, that's the moment where I made my promise to God that I wouldn't do this, that I would basically take up the commandment, thou shalt not kill, to more than just the circumstances of war. No, period. And it's the combination there. Without that incident, to make him make that promise to God, he's not the pacifist. He doesn't become a pacifist. That's where I think. I think it's the combination of both. So you're absolutely right. That is the pivotal moment of his life right there. And you need both that and his religion, his faith, to create the man that pulls off that miracle on the top of Hacksaw Ridge. All right, I think the first go.
There's just a quote I want to throw in here. I'm going to butcher the quote, and it's not from the movie, but I think it really epitomizes his character. A harmless man is not a peaceful man. A peaceful man is only a man who's capable of great violence, who chooses peace. And I think that really epitomizes him. I do think he's fully capable of doing all the bloody, dangerous, horrible things that these soldiers they had to do. And I think he could have absolutely done it, but he had to choose to be a man of peace.
But I think also that in his heart, he doesn't have the heart of a warrior. He has the heart of a savior. Because there could be a warrior could be a savior, but then someone who is willing, a savior is someone, as I would say, put their life on the line with somebody else without the desire to take a life. So some people are meant to be warriors, some are not. And in the end, from his life experiences, prove that he was meant to be a savior, one who goes the extra distance to reach out that helping hand and pull someone to safety, which he does.
And you always need a mix of those people, especially in war. You needed the people who were able to pick up those weapons, run to the front lines, and fight the enemy. But you also needed the savior, as you put it, to be there to catch him when he falls. So it's a combination of things. You need that in a military.
Look at Smitty, complete jackass in the first half. But when they got to the battlefield, oh, dude, before he got aced, dude, monster on the field. Monster on the field of war.
Very good at what he was doing. He's one of my favorite characters as well.
I
love nuanced characters like that who they seem like villains initially and you write them off. It's like, oh, that's just a bully character, but they reveal so much more about themselves where it's way more complex than that. And that foxhole scene you mentioned earlier, I know that's the second act, but that foxhole scene I think is incredible, showing the contrast between these two men.
Now, the fact that Desmond doesn't eat meat, that dude, just eat a hamburger. It's fine. It's not gonna kill you.
That's why you're so skinny.
Yeah, there you go. But here's the thing. So in the first half, to me, the most awkward there's the awkward moment in the first half of the movie that doesn't bug me, just like, oh man. And then there's what got me the most. The one awkward thing is his courting of his future wife, staring at her that way. That Andrew Garfield could not have looked more like a creeper when he was doing that.
It is accurate to the time. A lot of love stories from that era include creepy stuff like that. I mean, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers is only a couple decades after that, and I love that movie. I do love that movie, but there's a lot of love stories from that time that are depicted in this way. So it was the romance of the era.
Yeah,
it's applicably awkward, I think, because I do cringe watching.
It's the staring. It's the staring that gets that. I was like, why is he staring at her like that? I mean, yes, pretty girl, but man, he's staring at her like that.
I love the pickup line he uses when he comes back the second day to the blood drive, and he's like, "I need you to give me my blood back." Why? Well, because ever since you took some of it, my heart's been a fluttering.
Yeah, he stayed up all night getting that one right.
that's sweet awkwardness, and you just feel for the guy, and it wore her down eventually. I do like their love story. I'm glad it wasn't much longer. Their dynamic well.
You needed to do that because she played an integral part in the first half of the movie in terms of his reasons for doing things, and she was his anchor during basic training and stuff like that. But what I do want is I wish times were much simpler like they were back then when it came to courting. I wish it was simpler like that. Life was much easier. You saw somebody, you tell them you like them, you go on dates, and it was nice. It wasn't complicated. Anyway, so that's my only really thing that made me go, oh, geez. But when we get to basic training.
But just real quick, the other awkward scene you were mentioning was that the brick scene?
No. Now we're going to what makes me uncomfortable. Okay. That was the only awkward thing. I just thought the staring. I was like, why is he staring at her? I get slapped if I did that today. But he does get slapped, but that's because he, leaned in too quickly. Point is, here's the thing that got me the most in the first half. Combination of him and how the army treated him with his whole when he refused to do the rifle training. And I thought the behavior of the military. Now, of course, this is 1945. We're at the end of the war. War in Europe is over. All we got left is the Pacific Theater. And it is grueling because we'll talk about this when we get to the second half. The war in Europe and the war in the Pacific, two vastly different wars. Two different types of battlefields, two different types of opponents. The Japanese and the Germans, or the Japanese, the Germans, and the Italians, different combatants. Totally different. We get a feeling in this movie. Japanese, different mentality when you're fighting those guys back then. Completely different than fighting the Germans. Germans, they'll surrender. They'll give up. because in Germany and the U.S., with the Axis and the Europe, there were POW camps. Japanese ain't taking prisoners. There was no prisoners to be taken over there. There were no camps. There was no prisoners of war. There was, as far as I know. Listen,
there were some, but they were very limited.
I'm more of an expert on the European theater than the Pacific theater. That's where my knowledge mostly lies.
There is a great true story about a prisoner of war who was captured by the Japanese. It's called Unbroken. I don't know if you've seen the movie or read the book.
I've heard of it.
That's an incredible POW story in Japan.
But I mean,
that's just 100% more rare, and they're way more.
There's
prone
not
to
camps.
just execute.
Like when we watched The Great Escape, literal camps, Geneva Convention, all that kind of stuff that didn't exist in the Pacific.
That's true. Yeah,
it did not exist.
In Unbroken, it was full on like slave camps. It was horrible.
Yeah. The Geneva Convention did not exist in the Pacific, so Asia was Asia. So we'll get to that because I have some points I want to make about that later on. But so it's 1945. We're fighting the war in theater, and by then it's just America, Japan. Everybody else is done. The war is over everywhere else. So you have casualties piling on both sides. You look at these guys got what, a month or two of training. They were shipped off to that meat grinder over there. And you heard the way you get there, you realize they're just shipping them in and out because they just need more warm bodies to throw at these battle lines. Stress. You can understand the stress because even though Eisenhower is Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, MacArthur is in charge of the Pacific. So two different mentalities over there. And they're stressed. Understand that. But the fact that nobody could come to a compromise on either side between the way the Army treated him despicably, and then here's what gets me. So it's after he's been arrested when he was going to go on leave, and then they said you're not, even though they've classified he's going to be a medic, which, to me that says fine. He's a medic. What more does he need to do if he's going to help people stay alive on the field? That I would find that fine. But when they get him arrested and he misses his wedding, and then wifey comes over and talks to him in the cell, when she says let go of your pride, you're prideful. In that moment, I thought, there's your out, dude. Your wife, the woman that you trust, you're going to trust your heart with, your life with when this is over. She says, compromise. And here's where I find fault with Desmond in all of this, that he couldn't find the smallest compromise just to even hold the rifle, go through the motions to then go on to do, because once he was there, they wouldn't have made him carry the rifle. They just wanted him, if he had just held it for the training purposes, that was it. To me, I find rigidity distasteful. And that's my biggest problem there.
I do disagree with that sentiment because there is the idea of a slippery slope. There was already a compromise made. There was already the deal made with the psychiatric colonel who said, all right, you just need to qualify as a medic and you'll be good to go. You won't need to touch
Then they moved the
rifle.
goalposts. And
then they moved the goalposts. So if there hadn't been the trial, if he hadn't stood up for the trial, the goalpost would have been moved again. It would have been moved again. I think the most compelling example, 100%. Okay. I 100% believe that because of how angry that colonel came into the room when he was signing the form. That guy was ready to go to war before a general came in and slapped him on his ass. But the example given by the captain in the prison cell, I think, is the most relevant, is what happens when a German soldier runs at you while you're taking care of a prisoner on the battlefield? What, are you going to throw your Bible at them? So there is a legitimate need for medics to carry weapons. As you see, the other medics have weapons and they use them in the battle on Hacksaw Ridge. And that is a prime example of, yes, you would want these medics to carry weapons.
True.
And the Army's going to keep pushing him. So I think if he had given in that moment, the goalpost would have been moved again. And then when he got to Asia, it's like, all right, we won't require you to shoot the weapon, but you need to at least hold it so the Japanese are scared of you. Oh, okay, it's the battlefield. They're coming at you. You got to shoot them to save your own life. And I just see that as being the obvious, the thing that's going to happen. That colonel was just too angry.
Oh, he was over the top.
He was over the top. But those goalposts, they moved once, they can be moved again. He already tried to compromise. He already tried to do what he could, and they proved to be untrustworthy. And so standing his ground was the only act he could. It was either go to prison or betray everything he believed in. And I can't blame him for that decision, especially with the way that we see he proves that it's not cowardice. That's all he needed to do.
I knew from the beginning that he wasn't a coward because of because when he says to his parents why he's going, I have to go. When he's talking to the psychiatrist, says I have to go there. I can't. These other brave men are dying. I can't just sit here. I knew he wasn't a coward. I never even thought he was a coward once in this. Yeah, and I didn't know this story. I didn't know this true story at all. So I went into this as blind as you were about what was going to go on here. So it's something about rigidity in general, and be that as it may, where you say they would have moved the goalposts. Distinct possibility, probably true, but
and there's also the danger of if he compromised, right, and went to Japan and they said, all right, hold the gun just so the Japanese are scared of you or whatever reason, the goalpost moves again. If he disobeys an order there in a combat zone, that's a firing squad he'd be facing. So it's better to face prison now in America than face a firing squad when the goalpost is moved again.
Fair point. It's just rigidity sets me off because we live in a world right now where we all try to stand for our beliefs, but sometimes compromises do need to be made in order to make progress and move forward on something. And I know there are times in my life where I stood my ground and I paid for it and bad things happened. So this is just my own personal experience of sometimes I have to put my own pride aside, my own ego aside, and find a compromise to play the game and get forward. Granted, different world back then, wartime, and there's a thing involved this that has involved me. His faith. That's something that's not a part of my decision making, but his faith was his decision making matrix. Everything in his life went through his faith before he made a decision. Now, his father criticized him for it all the time. When we heard the speech, it's like, you can't sit there and analyze. You're analyzing it right now. So that was his character, to use his faith to analyze something. And that's not something I can completely understand, but I'm aware of it. And I can accept that he did it that way. I instinctively react against rigidity. It's a thing that just through personal
it's understandable, and that is one of the reasons I really like his character, because there is the argument to be made that he is a flawed person, a flawed character, because in that situation, I'm not a pacifist. I would be fighting with everybody else if I could. I mean, I joined the military as well. I had to qualify with a rifle and had to requalify every year, but he's a different man than myself. I can disagree with his decisions, disagree with his moral compass to a degree, but find so much complexity in him that I love this character. I love this movie. I never thought I would love it this much, but this is one of my favorite war movies of all time now. Like it's ranked high up for me because he's a flawed character just trying to do the right thing.
Well, he's a real person. This is a real man. This isn't just something pulled out of fiction air. And real human beings are flawed. None of us are perfect.
No. Yeah. And that's why I vehemently disagree. For a fun experiment, I went into Rotten Tomatoes after watching this movie to see why it had an 83% or something like that. So the critics thought it was fine or semi-good or whatnot, but reading the negative reviews were hilarious. Some people were just saying, oh, it's hero worship. They don't portray Desmond with any complexity. That one made me laugh.
No. This is the scenes we've already discussed show all his complexity in the world.
And yeah, just hero worship. And my favorite one was, this is a movie about a pacifist. Why isn't it so violent? It's at war with itself because it can't decide whether or not violence is good or not.
Oh, no. This is not about violence being good or not. This is about a man sticking to his beliefs and choice and proving that his actions do not define him as a coward, but his actions define him as a hero.
And I would 100% argue that this would be a much worse film if it hadn't been as violent and gory as it was.
Oh, no,
it shows the contrast. Being a pacifist in a situation like that is insanely different. Every man living at home can be a pacifist living their day-to-day life, but can you be a pacifist when hordes of enemies are literally coming out of the ground and chasing you down?
Well,
the gore needed to exist for comparison.
I think that now let's jump to the second half, and we'll talk about literally the meat of this movie, this meat grinder that was Hacksaw Ridge on Okinawa. I think I think with his defined nature, it is easy to understand and look at the way he behaved on the battlefield when they get there. First, let's talk about first. They get there and they're seeing the previous company that was there dead, literally dead to nearly a man, and with only a couple guys left to be absorbed into that rifle company. And you get a look at this Hacksaw Ridge, literally a sheer cliff face. Only way to ascend it, a rope ladder that's been put up by the Americans.
Which,
That's
real
it.
quick, this part is one of my few flaws and criticisms of the film. It is a hard pill to swallow that this ridge is the only way to move your invasion force forward. There's obviously, it really was because it's a historical event, but I wish the film had gone to a little bit more effort to show, hey, there's these things on this side, there's those things on that side, the terrain's worse, or just giving an explanation for why it had to be funneled.
Here's the thing that is missing. You're correct. If you are not a World War II enthusiast or historian in any way, shape, or form, you do not understand that this was island battle. Going island to island, a literal battle of inches. And what was more, what you saw here was very close to World War I type of fighting. Trenches. In the European theater, we're talking open battlefields, tanks are in play, air support. Here it was naval support. And yes, there were of course aerial battles off of carriers because the Japanese Zeros and all kind of stuff, but you don't get the same kind of air support here that you would get in the European theater, where here come the bombers to soften everything up. And this time you have ships softening it up, but it's a more hellish thing because when you have the bombers, it's a different kind of attack with the cannons from the battleships. That's truly hell on earth right there. We saw like a great depiction of what essentially is akin to a carpet bomb, a saturation of the battlefield up there. But with those trenches up there and the tunnels, it's very close to World War I, especially when they're coming in with the bayonet warfare. It was vicious up there. So you're right. The movie does not do a good job. It's one of the, I guess you said, one of the few families. They do not do a good job of telling the viewing public, the audience, what the Japanese theater, the Pacific theater was like. Island battles, these tight confined places. This isn't something like where Patton could do an end run around something on the battlefield and strike up a new position on the lines. No, on this island, that's the path. That's the path. If you're going to own it, you have to own the whole island. It's not just moving the battle lines. You have to control the whole island so that your forces can move up and set up a fresh line of naval. What was, I guess, a line. Let's say a line. A naval line where the carriers can come in safely and lend support, and then fresh supply lines can be established. You need to own each island. There's no other direction. And the movie doesn't present that. They just show, in fact, you wouldn't even know you're on an island if they didn't say Okinawa.
And not everyone knows Okinawa's geography.
Yeah. So
it does expect you to have a little bit of basic knowledge about the Japanese or the Pacific theater that I don't have a lot of that information. Like, I didn't know it was on an island until you just said it. That's partially my failing as well. But I think they're really focused on Desmond as a character, so they don't need to show the broad aspects of the war. Just tell me why this ridge is the only way to get to Okinawa. It's 2 lines. Just say, hey, this island is very raised up. It's all cliff faces all around, and this is the only lowered beach approach. Yeah. That's it. You got it. So I just needed a little bit.
Landing zone, but it was island warfare, island to island to island. I'm going to come back to this at the end of the discussion here on just how nasty the projections were of what they're going to do, because I'm going to make a point in this, and it may be a controversial point, but it's one I've made my entire life when discussing the Pacific theater. So I'm going to stand by this point. So we get there, and long story to the short of it, when they're up there, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare up there. Where we're just going to say the Japanese, they used all the old-timey racisms in this movie. All the old-timey racisms.
Oh, there was
is.
some great racism, and like at the beginning, it's like, "I will call you chief as great honor and respect to your
That's
people."
just glorious. That's Vince
I
Vaughn being
love that.
glorious. I love that.
And the ghoul, the ghoul was great.
I love all that stuff. But the old-timey racisms against the Japanese in this movie, that's all.
It's historically accurate.
You want to hear every slur? They were all used in this movie. All of them. All of them. So, but up there, it's bloody, it's vicious. You see appropriate amount of gore. And then that first rush where you see these men who've been trained, a lot of them break. They break in that first rush.
Dude, Hollywood's a coward.
Oh, yeah. Mr. I'm running around with my dick slapping around everywhere. He just broke. He broke.
I don't remember seeing him like fire a single shot. Like he just looked scared the entire fight, which I can't necessarily blame him, but he had so much bravado throughout most of the film.
Nobody can be prepared for that kind of situation. There's nothing prepares you for that kind of fight where you got the Japanese coming out of the fog. They're popping up from the ground. They're swinging bayonets. They have, and that was true. They had no care for their own lives at this point. None. Because they were losing the war. They were losing. Yes, they had home field advantage. We had to keep shipping troops in, but they were running out of troops as well. And they were losing. It was
a war of who had the most warm bodies.
It was a war of attrition at this point. I'm going to put a pin in that because I'm going to come back to that comment later. So let's focus on the event then. They take it in the first thing. With some massive heroics, take those bunkers without the knowledge that there are tunnels. And that was the thing. All those islands had tunnels in them, and nobody knew until it happened. That's why they had flamethrowers eventually, so they could burn them out in the tunnels. That's a real thing. I forget if it was a Medal of Honor game or a Call of Duty game before Call of Duty became what it is now. When I played the World War II games, yeah, man, you get the flamethrower and you turn it on you turn it on that shit and you turn it on that shit. That's what you do. So those World War II games from the late 90s and through the early 2000s, fantastic depictions of what it was like when they give the armament. Great. I love those games. But anyway, so they have to hold position overnight, and they don't. And then the next morning, when the Japanese just come storming out of tunnels, and there's some great shots of just the Japanese soldiers like a swarm of ants racing across the field. What do? That's their
horde.
Where do you go? All you can do is fall back to the ridge in the net. It's not like there's a supply chain. They needed to take this so they could create a supply chain up on the bigger half of the island. But that's you can't get that because they just keep coming, and it's so vicious and nasty. And it was a nightmare, and they have to give up ground.
What could they have done? Like,
Nothing.
No one would be called a coward in that case. That's a horde coming at you. You have seconds to react. They had to retreat. That was the only logical thing in that moment.
And then of course, many of those men get wounded. Some of them get cut off. Like Desmond gets cut off during that. He gets cut off when he's trying to save people during the retreat. And then he's the only man. He's the only, we'll say, healthy man.
He does decide to go back. He makes it to the rope.
Well, he makes
it
there.
Physically decides to go back.
He makes it there. What I'm saying is, though, by the time he got there, the retreat had already happened. Everybody else was gone. What I'm saying was he was the last healthy man at the top of the ridge. And he gets there, and then he has that pivotal moment. What do I do? What do I do? And that's his moment of crisis. And then because he's looking at this utter horror before him, this nightmare, and says, "Talk to me, God. Talk to me. Tell me what to do." And of course, God doesn't necessarily reply, but he looks at it and says, and he hears, and he looks and sees that there may be people still out there, and he says, "I understand my purpose here. I'm going to do what I came here. I'm here to not kill, but what I've been saying the whole movie, I'm here to try and save a life." And then the line, just one more. Please, God, give me strength to get one more. That's a beautiful sequence. Just give me the strength to get one more. And great shots of this is his raw hands from the rope burns. And one by one, saving the men whose respect he earns as he saves one after another. And he just does the impossible.
over and over again. Saving
Yeah.
one life in that scenario would be impressive.
Yeah.
And he still learns the cost. He doesn't save everyone.
Mhm.
After he gets down from the ridge, he finds out that that medic who he didn't give plasma to
Yeah.
died from shock. If he had
Mhm.
given that man plasma, he would have lived. So he had life and death in his hands, and that's already hard enough for a pacifist.
Mhm.
But he kept going back in, and I think every one of those lives was a miracle, let alone 75 in a row.
And the best one is when he saves Vince Vaughn. That's the best one. I was waiting. I'm saying he's going to find him. We know Sarge is still alive up there with Hollywood. We know. And then he finds him, and then it was as glorious as I knew it would be.
And he just casually takes that rifle, though. He's willing to touch it to save a life.
He used it as he quickly wrapped it up, and it was a method to pull him along. And then Vince Vaughn going, it's great. It was visually perfect. And then, of course, I love the callback to the brazier rope moment when he gonna wrap that in tits, and that he uses that to get people down. And what I do like in that moment, I don't know if you caught that, he manages to bring Smitty's body back.
I was going to mention that. I love that he brought Smitty home because, Smitty's one of my favorite characters in this movie. He's complex. He starts out as a bully, then you come to really like him, and there's a lot of show don't tell with his character. Obviously, in the Foxhole, there's telling his backstory a little bit and reacting to Desmond's backstory, but just seeing Desmond on the battlefield, they cut to Smitty reacting to Desmond in that first day when they, take the bunkers and dig in for the night. You see Smitty reacting to everything Desmond's doing. Desmond saves his life at one point. Tackles a guy, which apparently isn't violent enough to cause a problem. But yeah, he tackles a guy, saves Smitty, then Smitty saves him back. And that night when Sarge is like, all right, everyone dig in, don't go piss on your own. And Desmond just turns to walk back and start helping soldiers, and Smitty immediately volunteers to go with him.
Yep.
And yeah, it's great show don't tell with his character because they don't explicitly say his arc until it's almost done with that foxhole scene.
Yeah.
And by the time his legs get blown off like they do, you feel for him. I felt for him a lot. It was an emotional moment. And then to see after all of that, because I think it was Smitty's death that helped motivate him to go save
It was. I agree.
He failed to save this man who was becoming his friend. He tried everything he could. He couldn't get him down the mountain. And the scene you mentioned where he's just like, God, please tell me what you want me to do. Some would argue that God did respond with the cries of that injured man out there that he heard. He specifically heard someone crying for help, crying for a medic back in the fog. And that's what gave him the motivation to go. But at the very end, when he needs to get down from the ridge, there's no more people he can save, and the Japanese are coming. He still tries to grab Smitty's body and brings him down to the bottom of the ridge. And they don't address it. When they get down there, they're not like, hey, this is Smitty. Oh my God, you brought him back. There was no dialogue about it.
That's Mel Gibson with a great moment, and you have to be paying attention. You realize that's Smitty's body that he brings down.
I'm glad he brought Smitty home because he deserved to be with his brothers.
I mean, Smitty was an asshole, but he was their asshole. That's kind of how I look at it. He's an asshole, but he's our asshole. Anyway, so the miracle, and then I really like the following night, the day before they take the ridge, they go back and try to take the ridge, where he's their lucky charm. And that's a real thing on those battlefields back then in World War II. If somebody was considered lucky charm, the company just they rally around that guy. He's everything to them. If he's the guy that gets you out of this hell, there it is.
Confidence and motivation are better weapons than any bullets on a battlefield like that.
When they go back up and when they take it, the fight that they all have after that, it's different than that initial day, the previous day, where they were all scared. No, they are fired up. And even in that moment, and of course, then the Japanese do dishonorable stuff, because at that point, to them, it's not dishonorable. They're sacrificing themselves, the bonsai, the kamikaze type of stuff. They're pretending to surrender, but then they're actually throwing grenades, and Desmond kicks a grenade. That's some kung fu shit right there. But he does it.
It's better than it was in the trailer. I don't know if you ever saw the trailer back in the day, but in the film, he grabs the one grenade out of the air, throws it back, or swats it out of the air. The other one, it lands on the ground, and he kicks it on the ground back towards the Japanese. In the trailer, it's a full-on kick in the air, like the grenade's at his waist.
The one I saw, it kicked it in the air. When
I didn't see
the
that
version I saw.
No, in the version I saw, I just saw the one on the ground.
Oh no, the version when I saw, he kicks it in the air. He kung fu kicks that grenade in the air.
Cheesy.
I thought, what's he doing? He's kicking that grenade.
That's a little ridiculous. I do agree. I think kicking it on the ground and swatting out of the air is totally fine, but kicking it in the air is a little ridiculous.
But yeah, that's why it stuck out to me. Like, he just kicked a grenade in the air.
It's so weird, and he kicked it back towards Japanese soldiers, and it killed them. So
yeah, but he got wounded. But then that's it. Wounded in battle, going home.
But I think the pacing's really good in this part because they realize that this is the epilogue. They realize that they understand, hey, the big rich scene is over.
We need to end the movie. Mel Gibson's like, we're ending the movie. This is it. No more.
They just had a few great scenes. I love the scene with the captain after Desmond comes down from the ridge and he's like, I judged you so wrongly, and I hope someday that you can forgive me, but we're going back up to the ridge and we can't go without you.
You're a miracle. You're a miracle right now.
That scene is great. And then just waiting for him to pray because it's on his Sabbath. And they just rush in there. It's a few minutes of montage of them taking the ridge. And it's finally hopeful. And I think this movie definitely needed some hopeful aspects to it.
And you know that it's over when the Japanese commander is committing seppuku. That's how you know it's over. When he's that it's done. They were over. And it wins. Now, that's the end of the movie. And then we have that great montage of the real life interviews, which is fantastic. Great addition. Great choice by Mel Gibson. Now, here's where I want to make some commentary on this. The war in the Pacific, as I said earlier, was completely different than the war in Europe. At that point, this is 1945. This movie does a great job of showing you just how horrific the battles were on these islands. That's just a snapshot. Every island fight, they fought for inches every time. And people were dying. It was becoming a war of attrition that we would win, but at too great a cost to those young men that were going over there, which is why I think if you see this, and this is my opinion, if you see this movie, I think it becomes clear why the bombs had to be dropped. You had to shock. You look at the Japanese were going to kill themselves to a man. Not only did you do this to save yourself, you did it to save what was left, and they were willing to kill themselves over and over again, throw themselves for every inch on those islands all the way to the main island. You had to do something so decisive to say, listen. Of course, it was a bluff. Those fat man and little boy was all we had. It's all we had. Barely got those things held together by spit and snot. And just the threat that we will do this over and over again forced the ceasefire, forced the surrender, because millions more would have died on both sides. Millions more. And I think this movie does an excellent job of showing just how, while horrific in their own right, how necessary it was to pull that lever and drop those bombs to end those boys getting their legs blown off, getting mauled, getting maimed, to end it. Wouldn't have ended any sooner. Would have gone on for another year or two. That's how much longer it would have gone on. Had to end when it did. And I mean, I know it's a very difficult thing for one to say, but I have said this my whole life. Once I understood how the Pacific Theater went studying World War II, it had to play out that way. And I think this movie does an excellent representation of just how horrible what the nightmare fighting conditions were like over there. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
And
I think most people can, or at least a lot of people like you who have studied this era and this Pacific Theater, agree that more lives were saved than were taken because of the bombs. The only real argument I've heard against it from people who know what they're talking about is the choice of targets could have been chosen a little bit better.
Different, yeah. There's
the civilian casualties are more what's concerning, but the mere idea of using those weapons in that moment, I don't think was an untoward response based on the type of warfare that was going on. It's more about the targets chosen that becomes
that's a different discussion.
And philosophical. Hindsight is 20/20 thing, but targeting civilians is where the problem comes in. But besides that, the
Japanese were not going to surrender.
You needed to shock and all of them.
They were not going to surrender. They were going to fight until they were annihilated. And that's just the truth. And about the Nagasaki and Hiroshima, that is definitely a discussion to be had,
Mhm.
whether or not those were legitimate targets. I mean, there could have been military targets chosen, but then you make the argument that you needed to show we could get you anywhere. I mean, there's so that's a different discussion, which not this type of stream to have it on. But I
No.
wanted to bring it up, just the
Mhm.
fact that this movie shows you just how terrible the war in the Pacific was, and just to add on that why the bombs had to be dropped. I just felt I needed to say that from a historian's point of view
Mhm.
and an enthusiast point of view. All right,
I think it very accurately shows the meat grinder, if nothing
Mhm.
else, because
Mhm.
of World War II films I've seen, this one epitomizes the term meat grinder. It
Yeah.
was a horrible thing that bodies just get fed into, and meat was coming out the other end. It's
Yeah.
a horrifying ordeal that I can't imagine anyone not being scarred for life coming out of there. That's why I have so much sympathy for Hugo Weaving, because
Mhm.
even though he didn't go through Hacksaw Ridge specifically, but like you were saying, trench warfare in World War One, it was really bad too.
Very
So coming out of that alive and no one really understanding or even respecting that your mind was in ruins after an event like that,
Mhm.
I have so much sympathy for him.
Mhm. And I mean, on the day we watch and talk about Patton, there'll be a scene that is you get a taste of the carnage that happened in the European theater over there, but there's particular scenes towards the end when we're winning, where he comes upon it's great scene. You have a tank battalion on night patrol, and they come across a German tank battalion going, but everybody runs out of gas. And that's the point because they were moving supplies around Montgomery, and there's this whole bunch of there, and a fight has to happen. And Patton comes upon this battlefield the next day, and he finds the particular captain we had seen at the beginning of that for previous night's scene, and he asks the soldier, "What happened here, son?" And he says, "We came across him in the night. We kept fighting until we ran out of gas. We ran out of ammo, and when the sun rose, we were fighting with fists and knives." And he's just sitting there in shock at just the magnitude of the brutality of what they were willing to do to fight in that moment. And Patton just leans forward and just kisses him on the forehead. And it's a powerful scene, and it kind of represents the brutality of all of this. And that's doing it in an artful form. This movie is showing you the raw brutality of the Pacific theater and understanding just how these men were affected. And of course, this movie is a lot more powerful. This is from the point of view of the soldier on the ground. Patton is the movie from the perspective of the command, from all that kind of stuff. But that's a discussion to be had at a definite later date. All right. Is there anything else you want to throw out there on this?
There's a couple scenes I want to talk about. So I can't overstate how much I love this movie, how impactful it was for me to watch it last night. I literally had to let the credits finish and just sit with it. There's very few movies that I watch that I just feel a little emotionally drained after. I mean, watching Return of the King for the first time is one of those where it's just you feel so emotionally edified afterwards. This is a experience that I will remember for a long time. My main criticisms with the film come in what I was saying, the logistics of Hacksaw Ridge itself, needing to a little bit more information about why that was the battlefield specifically, but also I wish the movie was longer and specific things. I think we needed 2 or 3 more scenes to really sell things home. The scene you talked about early on in the first half of the film where the 2 brothers fought as kids and Desmond grabbed a brick and nearly bashed in the brains of his brother. That scene felt open-ended, and I never felt like we really got closure to that or got closure to the brother going off to war. So
I agree. I totally agree on that.
I would have liked to see a scene where probably the best place for it is after the brother joins the military, but before he goes off to war or anything like that, he talks to Desmond. And that's when we actually find out about the men from their village who Minecrafted themselves, because Desmond does mention that several men who weren't able to join the military in his hometown Minecrafted themselves because they couldn't go. That just came out of nowhere. We needed setup for that. So I think a scene with the brother where you find out about those men and his brother talks to him about how important it is that even though their dad's the way that they are, they have to remember, just like their mom, every time their mom sees how violent their father is, she tells them, I wish you could have known him before the war. They need to make those same decisions as their father did before World War One. So just kind of closing it off, having the brother be part of the motivation for Desmond to join the military, talking about those childhood friends who Minecrafted themselves, and just getting a little bit more of a transition in there and closure with the brother is important in my opinion. Otherwise, that brick scene, you could cut it out because the later half of the film talks more about the scene where he interrupts his dad from killing his mom. That scene seems to be more pivotal. Well, we need closure to the boyhood scene, otherwise cut it.
I agree. I felt this was going to be a criticism until the montage at the end. I thought the brother was dead.
Yeah,
I thought he died.
They didn't make that clear.
They completely removed any sort of communication about the brother's fate, what theater he was in, nothing. And I feel like that is missing something. I agree with you. When I thought, oh, his brother is alive and his brother lived, I thought something must have happened. No, he lived. We just never hear anything about it because he obviously just went over and did his patriotic duty, and that was it, I guess. And so,
well, you also mentioned there another part of the film that I think needs another scene. I do like the moment where he's being ferried down from the top of the ridge and it cuts to the interviews. I think there should be a scene in between those moments, though. I think we needed a scene of him returning home, returning to his wife, getting closure with his wife, and closure with his father. I can't imagine how impactful a scene like that, where Desmond limping comes home and has an emotional reunion with his father, where it's just his dad crying, and then he looks his father in the eyes and says something like, I understand.
Yeah,
and you could find out that the brother's alive in that scene as well, but you needed family closure. That's my big criticism in the film.
Him on the stretcher is awkward. On the stretcher hanging, it's a little awkward. I think that's like one, as we said, there's only a couple moments in the movie where I think Mel Gibson kind of fudges it, and I think that's right there. That's a very strange way to end the movie itself. You save it with the actual footage of the interviews. It gets saved. If it just ended like that, if it just ended like that, I went like, that's the end. We're not going to see him go home, hug his wife. After all that, I agree with you completely.
Yeah. So just add in a couple more scenes. The film's only just over 2 hours, so I think we have the room or a little bit of maneuvering things around to cut stuff in the first act to make room for those. But those two scenes, I think, would greatly help the film.
I agree.
And I do want to end off with one other thing. I don't know. Are you a fan of MASH?
I've seen it when I was younger. I mean, I watched the original movie. I've watched enough of the series in syndication growing up. It was all right. I mean, different war, but
right, different war. But I actually love the MASH TV show. I haven't seen all of it, and I haven't seen the original movie, but I love the TV show.
The movie's good. Movie's really good.
I think this movie epitomizes one of the most famous quotes from MASH. I don't know if you know the "War is Hell" speech.
Probably somewhere in the back of my mind.
So Hawkeye says, when someone says, "Oh, war is hell," or something like that, all dramatic like, Hawkeye goes, "War isn't hell. War is war, hell is hell. And of the two, war is a lot worse. There's no innocent bystanders in hell. War is chock full of them." And I just really like that disconnection between war and hell, because war can be a whole lot worse than hell. Just because of that, if nothing else, is not everyone deserves to die. Not everyone deserves their fate in war. Most people, if you're religious, deserve their fate in hell.
Well put. I have no response to that. Yeah. So, all right, I've got nothing else to say. So, why don't we rate it? It's your week. You get to go first.
Okay, perfect. Well, yes, I thought this movie was incredible, near perfect. The script was fairly tight with just a few more needed scenes to really close off the emotional family beats of the film. Those are minor concerns, though. You know you've had a great movie experience when your big concern or your big criticism is, I wish it was longer. And this is a film that I'm glad I purchased to watch it, and I will be watching it many, many times to come. The performances alone make it an all-time great war film, in my opinion. That's why I have to give this film a 9 out of 10.
Wow, that's high praise from you. Okay, as for me, I enjoyed it. I thought it was like I said, for me, the best parts I think is the cinematography. I think it's a well-shot film. historically it gets across the war as hell type of stuff, how horrible it is, all that kind of stuff. I was surprised by the cast and how everybody did a fantastic job. But I don't think I was impacted as much as you were by it. But it is a good movie. I give it an 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 for me. I don't know if I'll ever watch it again, but I'm glad that I do have it under my belt as one that I know the history. I'm glad I know about this history now. I like to know these things. I don't like to be unawares of events like this. And I do like the complexity of the conscientious objector who's a pacifist but not a coward. I like the complexity of all that. So there we go. And I have decided what we're going to do next. We're going to take a stark turn away from the serious and go to something that I've pulled off the list. Excuse me, throat would try something. I'm pulling something off the list of things that were done on the previous incarnation of this show, but I would like to do again. See you at the party, Richter. We're doing Total Recall. Yes. You look so excited.
Never seen it.
You've never seen it. Oh, it is Arnold cringe action at its finest. We're going to Mars. We're going to Mars. Total Recall. I think you're going to like it because of the psychological questions you're going to have from it. Now, remember, this is based off a short story. This is nothing like short story. This is full-on sci-fi, crazy, awesome action. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Michael Ironside doing what Michael Ironside does best, being an asshole villain. There's all kinds of great stuff in this. One-liners all over the place. Screw you! Oh, it's great. It's got all the Arnold one-liners. You go into it understanding this is an early 90s Arnold action movie in all its glory. But there are good psychological questions. So, and I won't spoil the questions because I think you'll pick up on what they are by the end of it. Like, so just asking these questions. So I think we'll have fun talking about it, and then I think we'll have a good discussion about what's really going on here. What's really going on here? Anyway, so next, right? See, look, all right, this is great. This is great. Your better half loves it. There we go. For once, Rachel's on my side in one of these choices.
She does have good taste.
Yeah. Okay. The three titties. Yes, there are. This is the famous three.
Okay,
titties
I wasn't sure which movie it was from. I just knew that the remake of whatever.
Oh, we don't talk about that. Nobody talks about that.
No, it wasn't good. They kept the three titties in it, as far as I'm aware, though.
We don't waste our time with that movie. There's only one Total Recall, and it was the Arnold Schwarzenegger one. No, it's paper mache. Don't spoil it, Legatus. Go re-update your bot programming again. All right, guys. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We hope you had a good time. Hit those like buttons, subscribe, and we'll see you next week for more entertainment. Until then, guys, take it easy. Oh, it's taking a long time. I got